The morning sun filtered weakly through the thin, tattered curtains of Ravi's one-room apartment, bathing the cracked walls in uneven, dappled light. The room itself was a testament to his struggles, modest and worn, yet kept scrupulously clean. A narrow cot pushed up against the wall bore the marks of countless sleepless nights. Its mattress sagged in the middle, offering little comfort. Beside it stood a wobbly wooden table stacked with a handful of papers, a mug, and an old transistor radio Ravi often used to listen to the news. He groaned softly as he sat up, his stiff back reminding him of the years he'd spent driving his taxi through the congested streets of the city. Swinging his legs off the cot, he rubbed his face, exhaling a deep breath. Another long day lay ahead, but Ravi greeted it the way he always did, with quiet resilience. In the corner of the room, a small stove sat on a counter, its surface blackened with use. Ravi poured the last of his tea leaves into a pot and heated water, humming faintly to distract himself from the sound of his stomach grumbling. The tea would have to be his breakfast for now. With the steaming cup in hand, he stood by the only window in the apartment, gazing at the chaos outside. The world beyond was loud and alive. The distant hum of cars, the clatter of footsteps on pavement, and the occasional shout of vendors echoed up to his window. Ravi's gaze drifted to the skyline, where glass towers gleamed in the distance, symbols of affluence that seemed worlds apart from his life. Still, Ravi wasn't a man who envied others. His late grandmother had taught him to find contentment in small blessings, no matter how hard life became. She had raised him to value kindness, saying often, "A good deed is never wasted, Ravi. Even if no one sees it, the universe does." Those words had stayed with him, shaping the man he had become. For years, Ravi had quietly offered free rides to those in need. Elderly passengers heading to medical appointments, single mothers with heavy groceries, and most frequently sick patients with no means to reach hospitals or clinics. His taxi wasn't just a source of income, it was his way of giving back. After finishing his tea, Ravi grabbed a worn satchel that held his driver's permit and a few coins for the day. He locked his door and descended the rickety stairs of the apartment building, nodding to Mrs. Desai, his elderly neighbor, who always sat by the entrance knitting. "Good morning, Ravi," she called with a smile. "Off to work again?" "Morning, Auntie." "Yes, another day, another rupee," Ravi replied with a grin. Outside, his taxi waited faithfully in the dusty parking lot. It was an old yellow sedan with chipped paint and a slightly dented bumper, but to Ravi, it was more than a vehicle. It was a companion that had carried him through countless ups and downs. As he slid into the driver's seat, the familiar scent of leather and faint traces of fuel filled his nostrils. The engine sputtered to life after a few tries, coughing like an elderly man before settling into a steady hum. Ravi patted the dashboard affectionately. "Good morning to you too, old friend. Let's make it a good day." By mid-morning, Ravi had already ferried a handful of passengers. A hurried businessman had barked instructions at him while barely acknowledging his existence. A group of tourists had grumbled about the heat, oblivious to Ravi's patient efforts to navigate the city's congested roads. Neither group tipped him, but Ravi didn't mind. He was used to it. As he sat idling at a red light near the city center, a movement on the sidewalk caught his attention. A young woman was waving desperately, her free hand clutching the arm of a small boy who leaned heavily against her. The boy's face was pale, his eyes half-lidded with exhaustion. The woman's face was tight with worry as she tried to flag down a taxi. Ravi didn't think twice. He pulled over and stepped out to help. "Taxi. Please," the woman said breathlessly, her voice trembling with urgency. "Where to, Mom?" Ravi asked, opening the door for them. "The hospital," she replied, glancing anxiously at her son. "Please, it's urgent." Ravi's heart clenched as he took in the boy's fragile form. He quickly helped the child into the back seat, his small body feeling unnaturally light as Ravi guided him gently. The boy leaned against his mother, who wrapped an arm protectively around him, her face etched with fear and exhaustion. As Ravi drove, he kept glancing in the rearview mirror. The boy's breathing was labored, and his eyes fluttered closed as though even staying awake was a struggle. "Is he going to be okay?" Ravi asked softly, breaking the heavy silence. The woman hesitated, her voice cracking as she replied, "I don't know. He's been sick for weeks. The doctor said he needed more tests, but we couldn't afford them. My father finally sent us some money, so we're going now. She trailed off, blinking back tears. "I just need him to hold on." Ravi's grip on the steering wheel tightened. He glanced at the meter as it ticked upward, and then at the woman, whose hands trembled as she stroked her son's hair. With a deep breath, he made a decision. He said gently, his voice firm, "You don't need to worry about the fare. Let's just get him there safely." The woman looked up, startled. "But—" "No buts," Ravi interrupted, meeting her gaze in the mirror. "Consider it a gift. I'll pray for his health." Her lips quivered, and tears spilled down her cheeks. "Thank you," she whispered, clutching her son closer. "Thank you so much." The remainder of the drive was tense and quiet, broken only by the sound of the boy's shallow breathing. Ravi navigated through the city's chaotic traffic with a sense of urgency, silently praying for the child's safety. When they arrived at the hospital, Ravi quickly got out and opened the door for them. The woman struggled to lift her son, so Ravi stepped in, gently cradling the boy in his arms. The child's head lolled against his shoulder, and Ravi could feel the faint rise and fall of his chest. He carried the boy through the hospital entrance, where a nurse rushed to meet them. "He needs help," the woman explained urgently, her voice breaking. The staff guided them toward the emergency area, and Ravi stepped back to give them space. "Stay strong," Ravi said softly, placing a comforting hand on the woman's shoulder. She turned to him, her tear-streaked face full of gratitude. "You're a good man," she said. "I don't know how to repay you." Ravi shook his head and smiled faintly. "Take care of your son. That's all that matters." As he walked back to his taxi, his chest felt heavy, not with regret, but with concern for the boy. Though he didn't expect anything in return, the family's plight reminded him of his own struggles, of nights when he'd gone to bed hungry or days when he'd stretched his last few coins to make ends meet. Climbing into his taxi, Ravi adjusted the rearview mirror and sighed. The city outside was as busy as ever, indifferent to the quiet acts of kindness that played out in its streets. But as he drove back to his usual routes, the image of the pale boy and his mother lingered in his mind, haunting him in quiet moments. Little did Ravi know, his simple gesture of compassion had set into motion events that would soon transform his life in ways he could never have imagined. Ravi's life returned to its familiar rhythm in the days that followed. His mornings began with the hum of his old taxi, his afternoons were spent weaving through the chaotic streets of the city, and his evenings ended with the satisfying clang of coins in his hand, though they were often just enough to scrape by. Despite the monotony, Ravi's thoughts often drifted back to the young boy and his mother. He wondered if they had received the help they needed, if the boy's fragile condition had improved. But in his line of work, passengers were like fleeting stories here for a moment, gone the next, leaving behind only traces of their struggles or joys. It was a humid afternoon when Ravi found himself parked near the hospital again, waiting for passengers. The hospital's stark gray walls loomed above, its revolving glass doors in constant motion as patients, visitors, and staff moved in and out. Ravi leaned back in his seat, wiping the sweat from his brow with a small towel he kept in the glove compartment. As he scanned the crowd, a figure caught his eye. A woman, carrying a small bouquet of flowers, was emerging from the hospital entrance. She moved with purpose, her steps light yet deliberate, as though a weight had recently been lifted from her shoulders. Ravi squinted, recognition dawning slowly. It was the young boy's mother. Her shoulders no longer slumped with worry, and there was a brightness in her face that Ravi hadn't seen before. She spotted him almost immediately and stopped in her tracks, her eyes widening in recognition. "Excuse me," she called out, hurrying toward him. Ravi stepped out of the car as she approached, a warm smile spreading across his face. "Ma, it's good to see you again," he said. "How's your son?" Her smile was radiant, her voice trembling with emotion. "He's doing so much better," she said, clutching the bouquet to her chest. "The doctors found the issue and started treatment right away. He's gaining his strength back, and they say he'll make a full recovery." Ravi felt a surge of relief. "That's wonderful news," he said. "I'm so happy to hear that." "I came here today to bring flowers to the nurses," she continued, her eyes brimming with gratitude. "But when I saw your taxi, I had to stop. I've been hoping to find you again." Ravi chuckled softly, scratching the back of his head. "You didn't need to go out of your way. I was just doing what anyone would." The woman shook her head firmly. "Not everyone would have done what you did. You didn't just give us a ride. You gave us hope when we needed it most." She reached into her bag and pulled out a small envelope, holding it out to him. "Please take this. It's not much, but my father insisted we do something to thank you." Ravi hesitated, his pride battling with his gratitude. "Ma, there's no need for this." "Please," she interrupted, her tone gentle but firm. "You don't understand how much you helped us. This is the least we can do." Reluctantly, Ravi accepted the envelope. "Thank you," he said quietly. "But really, I'm just glad your son is okay." Her smile deepened as she clasped his hand briefly. "You're a good man, Ravi. Don't ever forget that." She gave him a final nod before turning and walking away, her steps brisk and confident. Ravi climbed back into his taxi and sat for a moment, the envelope resting in his lap. Curious, he opened it to find 5 crisp $20 bills, a total of $100. To someone else, it might have seemed a modest amount. But to Ravi, it was a windfall. It meant groceries for the week, repairs for his sputtering taxi, and maybe even enough to buy a pair of shoes to replace his worn-out ones. But more than that, the money symbolized something deeper, a validation of his belief that kindness mattered. The next few days were busier than usual. Ravi ferried passengers across the city, some rushing to meetings, others running errands or visiting relatives. Most of them barely noticed him, engrossed in their own worlds, but that didn't bother Ravi. He had never needed recognition to feel fulfilled. On a sweltering afternoon, as Ravi waited at a red light in the heart of the city, someone knocked on his car window. Startled, he turned to see a man in his 60s standing on the curb, gesturing for him to roll down the window. The man's appearance was striking. He wore a neatly pressed suit and carried a leather briefcase. His silver hair was combed back, and his sharp features gave him an air of authority. Yet, his expression was warm, his eyes crinkling slightly as he smiled. "Are you the taxi driver who helped my daughter and grandson last week?" the man asked when Ravi lowered the window. Ravi nodded, unsure of where this was going. "Yes, sir. Is everything all right?" The man opened the door and slid into the passenger seat without hesitation. "Everything is more than all right, thanks to you," he said, settling into the seat. "I've been wanting to meet you. My name is Mr. Kapoor." Ravi felt a flicker of unease. "Sir, I'm glad I could help your family. But there's really no need to thank me. I was just doing my job." Mr. Kapoor chuckled, shaking his head. "You're being too modest. My daughter told me what you did. Refusing the fare, carrying my grandson into the hospital, those weren't things you had to do. That kind of kindness is rare these days." Ravi looked down at his hands on the steering wheel, unsure of how to respond. "I run a small logistics company," Mr. Kapoor continued. "We're always looking for reliable drivers, and I think someone like you would be an asset to my team. How would you feel about working with us? It's steady work, with better pay and benefits than what you're likely earning now." Ravi's eyes widened in surprise. "Sir, I don't know what to say." "Say yes," Mr. Kapoor said with a grin. "And take your time to decide. Here's my card." He handed Ravi a business card, then reached into his briefcase and pulled out an envelope. "One more thing," he said, placing it on the dashboard. "This is for you. a small token of appreciation from my family. Before Ravi could protest, Mr. Kapoor opened the door and stepped out. "Think it over," he said with a wave. "And call me when you're ready." As the light turned green, Ravi drove to a quiet spot and parked. With trembling hands, he opened the envelope. Inside was a check for $5,000. Ravi stared at it, his breath catching in his throat. The amount was staggering, more than he had ever held in his life. For a long moment, he sat in silence, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what had just happened. Little did he know, this was only the beginning of the changes that were about to unfold in his life. The $5,000 check rested on Ravi's small kitchen table, like a dream he was afraid to touch. The paper felt almost too delicate, its crisp edges a stark contrast to the worn surface beneath it. For days, Ravi kept the check tucked safely in a drawer, pulling it out occasionally to remind himself that it was real. He knew he couldn't let it sit there forever. The money was a lifeline, a chance to ease the weight of years of financial strain. Yet, as much as Ravi needed it, he was unsure how best to use it. He thought about the repairs his taxi desperately needed, the overdue rent for his apartment, and the possibility of saving a portion for emergencies. But another thought kept creeping into his mind. This wasn't just money. It was a gesture of gratitude, a recognition of his kindness. How could he honor that? One evening, after another long day of driving, Ravi sat at his table with the check in one hand and Mr. Kapoor's business card in the other. The city's noises hummed faintly through the open window, and the scent of rain lingered in the air. Taking a deep breath, he dialed the number on the card. "Kapoor Logistics, this is Anita speaking," a cheerful voice answered. "Hello," Ravi said hesitantly. "My name is Ravi. Mr. Kapoor gave me his card and mentioned a job opportunity. Is he available?" "Of course," Anita said warmly. "Please hold for a moment." After a brief pause, Mr. Kapoor's voice came through the line. "Ravi. I was hoping you'd call," he said, his tone filled with genuine pleasure. "Have you had time to think about my offer?" "Yes, sir," Ravi replied, steadying his nerves. "I'd like to take the opportunity. I'm ready to work hard and prove myself." "I never doubted that for a second," Mr. Kapoor said with a chuckle. "Come to our office tomorrow morning, and we'll get everything sorted out. Welcome to the team, Ravi." The next day, Ravi arrived at Kapoor Logistics, a modest yet bustling office situated in an industrial area on the city's outskirts. The building wasn't grand, but it exuded a sense of purpose. Inside, the atmosphere was lively, with employees answering phones, moving crates, and coordinating deliveries. Anita, the receptionist, greeted Ravi with a smile and led him to Mr. Kapoor's office. "Ravi," Mr. Kapoor said warmly as he stood to shake his hand. "I'm glad you're here. Let me tell you how things work around here. We pride ourselves on reliability and integrity, and I believe you'll fit right in. We'll start you as a delivery driver. It's similar to what you're used to, but with newer vehicles and a steady paycheck." For the first time in years, Ravi felt a sense of security settle over him. As he signed the necessary paperwork, he couldn't help but feel that this was the beginning of a brighter chapter in his life. Ravi threw himself into his new role with determination. His training was straightforward, and within days he was navigating the city in one of the company's vans, a sleek, well-maintained vehicle that felt like a luxury compared to his old taxi. The steady income allowed Ravi to catch up on his rent, buy fresh groceries, and even replace his worn-out shoes. But beyond the financial stability, what Ravi appreciated most was the sense of belonging. His colleagues treated him with respect, and Mr. Kapoor often stopped by to check on him, offering words of encouragement. One afternoon, as Ravi finished a delivery and parked in the company lot, he spotted a familiar figure waiting near the office entrance. It was Priya, the young mother he had helped that fateful day at the hospital. Standing beside her was Aryan, her son, looking much healthier than before. His cheeks were no longer pale, and his eyes sparkled with curiosity. "Ravi," Priya called out, waving to him. Ravi climbed out of the van, his face lighting up with a broad smile. Priya, it's good to see you both. Aryan, you're looking strong, young man. Aryan grinned shyly and clutched his mother's hand. I'm feeling much better now, he said, his voice soft but cheerful. We just wanted to thank you again, Priya said, her expression full of warmth. I've told Aryan so much about how you helped us, and he's been asking to meet you. Ravi knelt slightly to meet Aryan's eye level. You're a brave boy, he said. I'm glad you're feeling better. You've got a lot of people who love you, you know that. Aryan nodded, his small hand reaching out to touch Ravi's arm. Mom says you're a hero, he said shyly. Ravi chuckled, his throat tightening with emotion. Your mom's too kind. I'm just a driver who got lucky enough to help someone special. Priya stepped forward, handing Ravi a small gift wrapped in colorful paper. This is from Aryan, she said. He insisted on making something for you. Ravi unwrapped the package carefully, revealing a handmade card. Inside, Aryan had drawn a picture of Ravi's old yellow taxi with a big red heart floating above it. Beneath it, in shaky but heartfelt handwriting, were the words, "Thank you for helping me. You're my hero." Ravi stared at the card, his eyes misting over. This is the best gift anyone's ever given me, he said softly. Thank you, Aryan. That night, Ravi placed the card on his table, leaning it against the wall where he could see it every day. As he sat with a warm cup of tea, he thought about how much had changed in such a short time. From a struggling taxi driver to someone who was not only earning a living but also making a difference, Ravi felt a profound sense of gratitude. He decided to use a portion of the $5,000 check to start something meaningful. The idea had been simmering in his mind ever since he met Priya and Aryan. Ravi's Rides, he whispered to himself, testing the name. A program that would offer free rides to patients in need, just as he had done for Aryan and countless others. It wasn't about recognition or profit, it was about paying forward the kindness that had changed his life. The next morning, Ravi pitched the idea to Mr. Kapoor. To his surprise, Mr. Kapoor was immediately on board, offering to fund the initiative and provide additional vehicles. It's a brilliant idea, Ravi, he said. Let's make it happen. And just like that, Ravi's dream began to take shape. Ravi's Rides began modestly, with just one extra vehicle and Ravi as the sole driver. At first, it felt like a natural extension of what Ravi had already been doing, picking up patients who couldn't afford transport and taking them to hospitals or clinics. Word spread quickly. And before long, Ravi was receiving calls from families across the city, each one grateful for the lifeline he provided. Mr. Kapoor, true to his promise, supported the initiative wholeheartedly. Within weeks, he arranged for 2 more vans from Kapoor Logistics to join the program, along with a team of volunteer drivers from the company. Ravi trained each new driver personally, emphasizing not just punctuality and safety, but the importance of compassion. It's not just about getting them there, Ravi explained during one training session. It's about making them feel cared for. Sometimes kindness is the best medicine. The drivers nodded, their faces reflecting a mix of admiration and respect. Ravi, once a humble taxi driver scraping by, had become a leader and an inspiration. One rainy afternoon, Ravi was driving through a crowded market district when he noticed an elderly woman struggling to carry a heavy sack of vegetables. Her frail frame was bent under the weight, and the puddles on the uneven road made every step precarious. Without hesitation, Ravi pulled over. "Auntie, let me help you," he said, stepping out of the van and offering to take the sack. The woman looked up at him, her face lined with years of hard work and worry. "Beta, you don't need to trouble yourself," she said, though her voice trembled with gratitude. "It's no trouble," Ravi insisted, lifting the sack with ease and placing it in the back of the van. "Where are you headed?" She hesitated, then gave him an address. Ravi drove her home, chatting lightly about the weather and her vegetable garden. When they arrived, the woman tried to offer him a few rupees as thanks, but Ravi shook his head. "Keep it, auntie. Buy yourself something sweet instead. The woman's eyes filled with tears as she placed a hand on his shoulder. The world needs more people like you, she said. As Ravi drove away, her words stayed with him. He had always believed that small acts of kindness could ripple outward, but moments like these reminded him just how deeply those ripples could reach. Back at Kapoor Logistics, Ravi's Rides was thriving. The initiative had grown from a simple idea into a community cornerstone. Hospitals began recommending the service to their patients, and local businesses offered to donate fuel and maintenance supplies to keep the program running. Priya and Aryan remained deeply involved. Priya often volunteered to coordinate schedules and manage calls, while Aryan occasionally rode along with Ravi, handing out small get-well cards he had made to cheer up the patients. One day, as Ravi returned to the logistics office after a long shift, he was greeted by a group of drivers gathered around Mr. Kapoor. They were discussing the program's latest expansion, another 2 vehicles, and additional funding from local sponsors. Mr. Kapoor turned to Ravi, a proud smile on his face. "You've built something incredible here, Ravi," he said. "The community is rallying behind you. How does it feel to be a changemaker?" Ravi chuckled, scratching the back of his head. "I'm just a driver who had a little help from good people like you," he said. "This program isn't about me. It's about what we can do together." "Spoken like a true leader," Mr. Kapoor said with a grin. One of the most memorable rides Ravi ever gave was to a young girl named Meera. She was 12 years old, battling leukemia, and her family lived far from the city. They couldn't afford regular transportation for her chemotherapy sessions, so Ravi's rides became their lifeline. Ravi quickly grew fond of Meera. Despite her illness, she was vibrant and full of curiosity, always asking questions about the city, or telling Ravi about her favorite books. "You must be the bravest person I've ever met," Ravi told her one day as they drove to the hospital. Meera smiled, her head bald from treatments but her spirit shining brightly. "You're brave too, Uncle Ravi," she said. "You help people every day. That's real bravery." Her words stayed with Ravi long after he dropped her off. Meera reminded him of why he had started the program in the first place, not for recognition or rewards, but to make a difference in the lives of people who needed it most. One evening, Ravi sat in his modest but comfortable apartment, reflecting on how far he had come. The check from Mr. Kapoor, the encouragement from Priya and Aryan, and the support of his colleagues had all been pivotal in transforming his life. On the small table in his living room, the handmade card from Aryan still held its place of honor. Ravi picked it up, tracing the lines of the childlike drawing. It wasn't just a keepsake, it was a symbol of everything he believed in: the power of kindness to heal, connect, and inspire. As Ravi stared out the window at the city lights, he realized something profound. His struggles had been the soil in which his compassion had grown. Every hardship he had endured, every sleepless night, and every empty pocket had prepared him for this journey. Months passed, and Ravi's rides became an essential part of the community. Ravi's simple idea had grown into a well-oiled system supported by volunteers, hospitals, and local businesses. Patients who had once struggled to afford transportation now had a reliable, compassionate service to depend on. Ravi's life, too, had transformed. The stability of his job at Kapoor Logistics allowed him to move into a better apartment, a modest 2-bedroom flat with a small balcony where he could sip tea in the mornings. His days were filled with purpose, and his heart was filled with gratitude. Yet Ravi remained humble. He continued to drive shifts himself, refusing to separate from the work that had brought him so much fulfillment. For Ravi, every ride was a reminder of the struggles he had faced and the small acts of kindness that had lifted him along the way. One day, as Ravi finished dropping off a patient at a clinic, he received a call from Priya. Her voice was excited and filled with urgency. "Ravi, can you come to the community center this evening? There's a little event happening, and we'd love for you to be there." Ravi hesitated. "Priya, you know I'm not one for events." Just this once, Priya interrupted. "Please. Aryan's been asking about you, and it would mean the world to him if you came." With a chuckle, Ravi agreed. That evening, Ravi arrived at the community center, feeling slightly out of place. The hall was decorated with streamers and balloons, and a small stage had been set up at the front. The room was filled with familiar faces, patients he had driven, families he had helped, and colleagues from Kapoor Logistics. As Ravi tried to slip quietly into a corner, Mr. Kapoor spotted him and waved him over. "There he is, the man of the hour," he exclaimed. Ravi frowned in confusion. "What's all this about?" Before Mr. Kapoor could answer, Priya stepped onto the stage with a microphone. "Good evening, everyone," she began, her voice warm and steady. "We're here tonight to celebrate someone who has touched all of our lives in ways big and small. Someone whose kindness has created ripples throughout this community." She looked directly at Ravi, and the room turned to follow her gaze. Ravi felt his face flush as he realized they were all looking at him. "This program," Sen, Priya continued, gesturing to a banner that read Ravi's Rides 100 Lives Changed and Counting, started with one man's decision to put others before himself. Ravi didn't just drive patients to the hospital, he gave them hope, dignity, and compassion. And tonight, we're here to thank him. The room erupted into applause and Ravi was ushered onto the stage. He felt overwhelmed as he looked out at the sea of smiling faces, people he had helped, people who now called him a friend. Priya handed him the microphone. "Say a few words, Ravi," she urged. Ravi cleared his throat, his voice thick with emotion. I don't know what to say," he began. "When I started driving my taxi all those years ago, I never imagined it would lead to this. I just did what felt right. My grandmother used to tell me kindness is never wasted, and I guess she was right." The audience chuckled softly, nodding in agreement. "This program," Ravi continued, gesturing to the banner, "isn't just about me, it's about all of you. The drivers who volunteer their time, the hospitals that recommend us, the businesses that keep us running, you've all made this possible. I'm just the guy behind the wheel." The crowd erupted in cheers and applause once more, and as Ravi stepped off the stage, Aryan ran up to him, clutching another handmade card. "This is for you," Aryan said, grinning. Ravi opened it to find a drawing of himself driving one of the Ravi's Rides vans, surrounded by smiling patients. Beneath it, Aryan had written, "Thank you for helping everyone. You're the best." Ravi knelt and hugged Aryan tightly. "You're the real hero, kiddo," he said, his voice breaking slightly. Later that evening, as the event wound down, Mr. Kapoor pulled Ravi aside. "There's one more thing," he said, handing Ravi a sealed envelope. Ravi opened it to find a letter and a check for $10,000. "The community raised this for you," Mr. Kapoor explained. "It's their way of saying thank you for everything you've done." Ravi stared at the check, his mind racing. I can't accept this," he stammered. "You already have," Mr. Kapoor said with a smile. "Now use it wisely. Whether it's for yourself, your family, or the program, it's your choice." Tears filled Ravi's eyes as he folded the letter carefully. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you, all of you." That night, as Ravi sat on his balcony, gazing out at the city lights, he felt an overwhelming sense of peace. His life, once filled with hardship and uncertainty, had blossomed into something beautiful, a testament to the power of compassion and the resilience of the human spirit. He thought about Aryan, Priya, Mr. Kapoor, and all the people who had come into his life because of a single act of kindness. His grandmother's words echoed in his mind, "Kindness is never wasted." Ravi smiled, lifting his teacup in a silent toast to the world. "Here's to the road ahead," he murmured. And for Ravi, the road ahead was brighter than he had ever imagined.